Sino ka para utusan ako? At bakit ko naman susundin ang isang ampon na tulad mo? The words, laced with so much venom, hit Nami harder than any physical blow. Katatapos lang niyang magsampay ng mga damit ng mga bata sa Bahay Pag-asa, the small, rundown shelter in Isla de Clara na nagsilbing tahanan niya for as long as she could remember. Ang nagsalita. Si Aling Bebang, ang bagong caretaker na kung umasta ay parang reyna ng shelter, lalo na't alam niyang ulila si Nami at walang ibang mapupuntahan. Pero bago pa makasagot si Nami, isang kislap ng mamahaling sasakyan ang huminto sa tapat ng gate nila. Bumaba ang isang matandang lalaki, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit, his silver hair neatly combed back. May kasama itong dalawang lalaking nakabarong na mukhang bodyguards. The air of wealth and power around him was palpable, so out of place in their humble, struggling shelter. Nami Sandoval, tanong ng matanda, his voice surprisingly gentle despite his intimidating presence. May hawak itong isang eleganteng sobre. Nami nodded, her heart suddenly pounding with a mixture of gulat and takot. Sino siya? Anong kailangan niya sa isang tulad niya? I am Rolando Monteverde, the old man introduced himself. And I have a proposition for you. Rolando Monteverde. The name echoed in Nami's mind. The Monteverdes owned practically half of Isla de Clara, including the land where Bahay Pag-asa stood. Kilala sila sa kanilang yaman at impluensya, pero pati na rin sa pagiging ruthless. Pinatuloy sila ni Nami sa maliit at sira-sirang opisina ni Sister Agnes, ang madring nagpalaki sa kanya, na kasalukuyang nasa Maynila para humingi ng donasyon. The contrast between Rolando Monteverde's expensive Italian leather shoes and the peeling paint of the office was jarring. Miss Sandoval, Rolando began, getting straight to the point. And my grandson, Leo, needs a wife. And I believe you are the perfect candidate. Napaawang ang bibig ni Nami. A wife? Para sa apo niya? Bakit siya? This had to be some kind of a cruel joke. Pipo. Hindi ko po kayo maintindihan. It's a simple arrangement, Hija, Rolando said, his eyes surprisingly kind, though his words were anything but. You marry in my grandson, Leo. In return, I will give you 10 million pesos. And, I will ensure that Bahay Pag-asa receives the funding it desperately needs to continue its operations and undergo much-needed repairs. 10 million pesos. The amount was staggering. Enough to save Bahay Pag-asa from its impending closure due to lack of funds. Enough to give the children better home, better food, better education. Pero ang kapalit? Kasal. Sa isang taong hindi niya kilala? Bakit ako, Dim Monteverde? Nami managed to ask, her voice trembling. Marami namang ibang babae dyan. Mas mayaman, mas edukada, mas bagay sa apo niyo. Rolando smiled, a sad, knowing smile. Because you, Nami, possess something they don't. You have a good heart. You are kind, compassionate, and you understand the value of family, even if you never had one in the traditional sense. And most importantly, his voice dropped slightly, you are not after our money or our name. You are untainted. Just then, the office door opened, and a young man walked in. Tall, lean, with sharp, aristocratic features and eyes as cold and distant as the sea on a stormy day. He was dressed in a simple but obviously expensive linen shirt and slacks. He exuded an aura of bored indifference. Leo, Apo, Rolando said, his voice softening. This is Nami Sandoval. Your future wife. Leo's cold eyes swept over Nami, a flicker of disdain in their depths. He didn't even bother to greet her. Is this really necessary, Lolo? His voice was a low, bored drawl. Can't you just hire an actress? Nami flinched. Actress? So, that's all she was to them. Isang tao-tauhan sa kanilang laro. Leo, we've been over this, Rolando said, his voice firm again. This is not just for show. This is for the good of the company, for the good of our family. The board needs to see stability. They need to see you settled. He turned back to Nami. My grandson, as you can see, is a bit raw around the edges. But he has a good heart, deep down. He just needs guiding hand. Liu scoffed, turning to stare out the window, clearly uninterested in the proceedings. His unwelcoming stance was clear message. 10 million pesos. A secure future for Bahay Pag-asa. Pero ang kapalit, isang kasal sa isang lalaking malamig pa sa yelo, isang lalaking halatang ayaw sa kanya. I need time to think, Dim Monteverde, Nami said, her mind reeling. Gulat. Takot. Pagkalito. Of course, Hija, Rolando said kindly. Take you day. But remember, Bahay Pag-asa is counting on you. The unspoken threat hung heavy in the air. After Rolando and his entourage left, Liu didn't even glance back. Nami walked through the shelter. Nakita niya ang mga bata, mga kapwa niya ulila, na masayang naglalaro sa bakuran, oblivious to the impending doom of their home. Nakita niya ang mga butas sa bubong, ang mga sira-sirang bintana, ang mga pader na nangangailangan na ng pintura. Sister Agnes had been trying so hard, pero laging kapos. Utang na loob. Yun ang nararamdaman ni Nami para sa Bahay Pag-asa, para kay Sister Agnes, para sa mga batang ito na naging pamilya na niya. 10 million pesos. It could change everything. It could save them. But at what cost? Her freedom. Her future. Her heart. That night, Nami couldn't sleep. The question, bakit ako, kept echoing in her mind. Was she really just a pawn? A means to an end for the powerful Monteverde family. And Liu, what kind of man was he, to agree to such a cold, calculated arrangement? The weight of the decision pressed down on her. The faces of the children, the crumbling walls of the shelter, Sister Agnes' worried eyes, they all flashed before her. As dawn broke over Isla de Clara, painting the eve in soft hues of pink and orange, Nami made her decision. A decision born not out of love, or even liking, but out of a desperate sense of duty and profound, aching love for the only home and family she had ever known. She picked up her old, battered cell phone and sent text message to the number Rolando Monteverde had left her. Monteverde, pumapayag na po ako. The reply came almost instantly. Excellent. This car will pick you up at noon. Welcome to the family, Nami. Family. The word felt like a cruel joke. She was trading her freedom for a cage, albeit gilded one. And her heart? Her heart was filled with a chilling mixture of gulat, takot, and a resignation so profound, it felt like a piece of her had already died. The isa 0 million peso wedding. It wasn't a dream come true. It was the beginning of a nightmare. Or was it? The Monteverde mansion was less a home and more a palace. Marble floors gleamed under crystal chandeliers, antique paintings adorned the walls, and uniformed staff moved about with quiet efficiency. It was a world away from the simple, often chaotic, life at Bahay Pag-asa. Para si Nami, she had stepped into a fairy tale, only she wasn't Cinderella, and there was definitely no Prince Charming. Liu Monteverde, her soon-to-be husband, was as cold and distant as ever. He barely acknowledged her presence, treating her more like an inconvenient piece of furniture than his fiancé. Noong unang araw ni Nami sa mansyon, naligaw siya sa dami ng pasilyo at kwarto. She accidentally stumbled into what looked like Liu's private study, a room filled with books, architectural models, and the faint smell of expensive collagene and old paper. What do you think you're doing here? Liu's voice, sharp and laced with annoyance, made her jump. Nakatayo ito sa pintuan, his arms crossed, his eyes narrowed. This is the private space. You are not welcome here. Sorry, Nami stammered, feeling like a scolded child. Naligaw lang ako. Ang laki kasi ng bahay niyo. Liu just scoffed. Tears sighed to be less of a nuisance, Miss Sandoval. We both know this is just a business arrangement. Let's not pretend otherwise. With that, he turned and walked away, leaving Nami feeling small and utterly humiliated. Tampuhan. Yun ang unang namuo sa pagitan nila. The business arrangement was formalized a few days later. In Rolando Monteverde's opulent office, with their lawyers present, Nami and Liu signed a prenuptial agreement that detailed the terms of their temporary marriage. It stipulated a 2-year contract, after which they could file for an annulment, no questions asked. Nami would receive the 10 million pesos in staggered payments, with a significant portion going directly to Bahay Pag-asa's renovation fund. The contract also included a strict confidentiality clause and, much to Nami's dismay, a public display of affection clause. You both need to be convincing, Rolando had warned them, his usually kind eyes now steely. The media will be watching. Our stockholders will be watching. Any hint that this marriage is a sham, and the deal is off. Understand? Nami and Liu both nodded, two unwilling actors forced to play the lead roles in a drama they didn't write. The first public test of their kunwaring pagmamahalan came a week later, at a high-profile charity gala hosted by the Monteverdes. Nami, dressed in an elegant but understated gown chosen by Rolando's personal stylist, Liu hadn't bothered to offer an opinion, felt like fish out of water. The glitz, the glamour, the insincere smiles of the alta sociedad, it was all too much. Liu, looking impeccably handsome in his tuxedo, played his part with practiced ease. He introduced Nami as his beloved fiancé, his hand resting lightly on her waist, gesture that sent shivers down Nami's spine, not of kilig, but of discomfort. He would occasionally lean in and whisper something in her ear, charming smile on his face for the benefit of the onlookers, but his words were anything but charming. Tears sighed to look less like a lost puppy, Miss Sandoval. You're embarrassing me. Or, that's Don Antonio, major stockholder. Smile at him like you actually mean it. Nami did her best, forcing smiles, nodding politely, trying to remember the names and faces Liu, or rather, Rolando's assistant, had prepped her on. It was exhausting. Then, Angel Locsin made her entrance. Angel was Liu's ex-girlfriend, a stunningly beautiful model/actress with a reputation for being a heartbreaker. She glided into the ballroom like she owned the place, her eyes immediately zeroing in on Liu and Nami. A predatory smile played on her lips. Liu, darling. Angel cooed, air-kissing him on both cheeks, her gaze lingering on Nami with a mixture of disdain and amusement. I heard the news. Engaged. How quaint. She looked Nami up and down. So, this is her. The replacement. Nami felt a flush of anger. Replacement. Liu's jaw tightened. Angel, this is Nami Sandoval, my fiancé. There was a subtle emphasis on the word fiancé, you warning perhaps, but Angel seemed unfazed. Of course, Angel said, her smile never wavering. Well, Nami, welcome to the family. I'm sure Liu will take very good care of you. He's always been so accommodating. The insinuation was clear and it made Nami's blood boil. Selos. Hindi para kay Liu, kundi para sa sarili niya, sa sitwasyon niya. Bakit kailangan niyang pagdaanan to? The rest of the evening was a blur of forced smiles and veiled insults from Angel, who seemed to make it her mission to monopolize Liu's attention. Nami felt like an outsider, an unwanted guest at her own engagement party. Later that night, back in the oppressive silence of the Monteverde mansion, Nami couldn't sleep. She found herself wandering onto one of the many balconies, a moleskin notebook and pen in hand, her only companions, her only solace. She loved to write, to pour her thoughts and feelings onto paper. It was her escape. Can't sleep. Nami jumped, startled. It was Liu. He was leaning against the balcony railing, a glass of what looked like whiskey in his hand, staring out at the glittering city lights. He hadn't changed out of his tuxedo. Hindi, Nami stammered. Masyado lang maingay sa isip ko. An awkward silence fell between them. This was the first time they had been alone together, without Rolando or the prying eyes of the public. About Angel. Liu began, his voice surprisingly hesitant. Wala yun, Nami cut him off, a little too quickly. Ex mo siya, di ba? Natural lang na magkita kayo. She didn't want to talk about Angel. She didn't want him to think she cared. Liu took a sip of his drink. She's complicated. Aren't we all? Nami found herself saying, a touch of bitterness in her voice. He looked at her then, really looked at her, not as Miss Sandoval, the business arrangement, but as Nami, the girl on the balcony with a notebook in her hand. What do you write about? He asked, gesturing towards her molesking. The question surprised her. Mga kwento. Mga tula. Kung ano-ano lang. Pampalipas oras. Can read some, he asked, another unexpected question. Nami hesitated. Her writings were personal, her innermost thoughts and feelings. But then, she thought, what did she have to lose? This whole situation was already a farce. Aside, she said, handing him the notebook. Liu sat on one of the balcony chairs and began to read, his brow furrowed in concentration. Nami watched him, her heart pounding. What would he think? Would he laugh at her amateurish attempts at poetry? Would he find her story silly? He read for a long time, the only sound the distant hum of the city and the occasional clinking of ice in his glass. When he finally looked up, his expression was unreadable. This one, he said, pointing to a specific poem. It's about feeling trapped, isn't it? Nami nodded, surprised that he understood. The poem was about a bird in gilded cage, longing for the eve. You're a good writer, Nami, Liu said, his voice soft, almost gentle. You have a way with words. You make feelings tangible. Nami felt a warmth spread through her chest. It was the first genuine compliment he had ever given her. Salamat. He handed the notebook back to her, their fingers brushing for a fleeting second. This time, the shiver Nami felt wasn't entirely unpleasant. You should keep writing, he said. Don't let this situation stop you. He stood up, finishing his drink. I should get some sleep. We have another public appearance tomorrow. The sarcasm was back in his voice, but it was a little less sharp this time. As he walked away, Nami looked at him. For the first time, she saw a flicker of something other than cold indifference in his eyes. Was it respect? Or maybe, just maybe, dawning awareness that she was more than just a name on a contract. The kunwaring pagmamahalan was still a painful charade. But that night, on the balcony, under the starlit sky, Nami felt a teeny, almost imperceptible shift. Liu had seen a glimpse of her soul, and he hadn't scoffed. He hadn't dismissed her. He had understood. It wasn't kilig, not yet. But it was something. A teeny spark of curiosity, perhaps. A reluctant acknowledgement that maybe, just maybe, the man she was forced to marry wasn't entirely made of ice. And that thought, as terrifying as it was also a little bit hopeful. The fragile truce that had formed between Nami and Liu on the balcony was short-lived. Angel Locsin, it seemed, was not one to give up easily. Para siyang linta, Nami thought bitterly, always finding a way to stick herself to Liu. Nami would often see them together in the Monteverde Corporation building, where Rolando had insisted Nami take on a token position translation, an office with no real work, just so she could be seen. Minsan, sa elevator, Nami would encounter them, Angel's arm linked possessively through Liu's, her laughter little too loud, her comments subtly dripping with condescension towards Nami. Oh, Nami, dear, still playing assistant. How diligent of you. Liu, for his part, would look uncomfortable, sometimes even annoyed by Angel's antics, but he rarely did anything to stop her. He'd offer Nami a curt nod, his eyes unreadable, and then steer Angel away. The selos Nami felt was a confusing mix. Hindi para kay Liu, inuulit niya sa sarili niya. Kundi para sa sitwasyon. Sa kawalan niya ng kapangyarihan. Sa pagiging extra sa sarili niyang love story. One particularly galling incident happened in the executive elevator. Nami was on her way to Rolando's office when the doors opened and there they were, Liu and Angel, their heads close together, whispering. Angel was laughing at something Liu had said, her hand resting intimately on his chest. When they saw Nami, Angel's smile widened, her eyes gleaming with triumph. Liu, however, quickly straightened up, a flicker of something, guilt. Annoyance? In his eyes. Well, if it isn't our little Nami, Angel purred. Going up, dear. Or perhaps going down? The double entendre was not lost on Nami. Nami just pressed the button for her floor, her face a mask of indifference, though inside, her blood was boiling. The elevator ride was suffocatingly silent, broken only by Angel's occasional saccharine sweet comment directed at Liu, clearly for Nami's benefit. Remember that little calf in Paris, darling? We should go back there soon. When Nami finally reached her floor, she practically bolted out of the elevator, her cheeks burning. Ang kapal ng mukha ni Angel. At si Liu. Bakit hindi siya nagsasalita? Bakit hinahayaan niyang ganun-ganunin lang siya ni Angel? Later that day, Nami couldn't hold it in anymore. She confronted Liu in the sterile, impersonal office Rolando had assigned her. Liu, yung kanina sa elevator. Nami began, trying to keep her voice calm. What about it? Liu asked, his tone defensive, already anticipating confrontation. Si Angel, Nami said, her voice rising despite her efforts. Bakit hinahayaan mo siyang i-disrespect ako ng ganun? Fiance mo ako, di ba? Kahit palabas lang, di ba dapat may konting respeto man lang? Liu sighed, running key hand through his hair. Nami, Angel is. Angel. She's always been like that. Just ignore her. Ignore her? Nami exclaimed. Paano ko siya i-ignore kung halos isampal na niya sa mukha ko na mas importante siya sa iyo kaysa sa akin? Na ako, yung fiance mo, parang hangin lang. The lungkot in her voice was palpable. Lungkot, not just for the disrespect, but for the dawning realization that maybe, just maybe, a teeny part of her did want Liu to stand up for her. Na baka, yung puso niya, hindi na lang ki-acting lang. That's not true, Nami, Liu said, his voice softening slightly. You're not hanging. He looked at her then, a strange, almost tender expression in his eyes. What Angel and I had it's in the past. You are the fiance now. And that means something. To my lolo. To the company. To you, Liu. Does it mean something to you? The question screamed in Nami's mind, but she didn't dare voice it. Look, I'll talk to Angel, okay? Liu said, sounding wary. I'll tell her to back off. Nami wasn't entirely convinced, but she nodded. Ayaw na niyang palakihin pa ang gulo. The next day was Nami's birthday. She hadn't told anyone. Sino naman ang pagsasabihan niya? Sa bahay Pag-asa, they usually just had the simple pancit and maybe a small cake if Sister Agnes managed to get some donations. It was nothing grand, but it was filled with love. Here, in the cold, opulent mansion, she expected it to pass unnoticed. She was surprised, therefore, when she entered her office that morning to find a small, elegantly wrapped gift on her desk. There was no card. Confused, Nami opened it. Inside was a beautiful, leather-bound journal, similar to the moleskin she always carried, but more expensive, more special. And tucked inside the first page was a single, pressed sampaguita flower, her favorite. Tears welled up in Nami's eyes. Sinong nagbigay nito? Si Rolando. Impossible. He wasn't the sentimental type. Could it be Liu? Just then, Liu walked in. He saw an open gift, the journal in Nami's hand, the tears in her eyes. He looked awkward. Happy birthday, Nami, he said softly. Nami stared at him, dense and ganhi. Di paano mo nalaman? Liu shrugged, faint flush on his cheeks. In Lolo he has a file on you. It was in there. He paused. I know it's not much, but I remembered you like to write. And the sampaguita. I saw you admiring them in the garden the other day. Nami didn't know what to say. This thoughtful, almost tender gesture from the cold, aloof Leo Monteverde, it was overwhelming. Yung puso niya parang biglang kumabog ng malakas. Hindi na to acting lang. This feeling, it was real. And it scared her. Salamat, Leo, she whispered, clutching the journal to her chest. It's beautiful. You're welcome, he said, then quickly excused himself, as if embarrassed by his own display of kindness. That evening, Doña Lucinda threw another lavish party, this time to celebrate Nami's birthday, though Nami suspected it was just another excuse for Doña Lucinda to show off. Nami wore another expensive gown, smiled at the right people, played her part, but her heart wasn't in it. Her mind kept replaying Leo's gesture, his soft, happy birthday, the unexpected warmth in his eyes. During a lull in the party, Nami found herself alone on the same balcony where they had their first real conversation. She looked out at the city lights, the new journal clutched in her hand. The sampaguita Leo had given her was now pressed between its pages. She thought of Bahay Pag-asa, of the children, of Sister Agnes. She thought of the 10 million pesos, the reason she was here. But then, she thought of Leo. His coldness, his sarcasm, but also his unexpected kindness, his hidden vulnerability, the way he looked at her sometimes. A tear escaped her eye, then another. She was falling for him. Falling for the man she was supposed to despise, the man who was part of this cruel, calculated arrangement. Pusong niloko pero lumalaban. Her heart, despite everything, was fighting for its connection, for a love she thought she didn't deserve, a love that was probably impossible. She quickly wiped her tears when she heard footsteps. It was Angel, triumphant smirk on her face. Crying already, dear? Angel purred. Don't tell me you're actually falling for him. How pathetic. She leaned closer. Let me give you some friendly advice, Nami. Leo, he's mine. He always has been, always will be. You're just a temporary amusement. A pabigat. To placeholder. Sooner or later, he'll get tired of this little game, and he'll come back to me. They always do, Dee. Nami stared at Angel, her heart aching. Pabigat. Placeholder. Was that all she was? And don't think for a second that little birthday gift means anything, Angel continued, her voice dripping with venom. Leo is just playing his part, he's good at that. But his heart belongs to me. Nami didn't say anything. She just turned and walked away, leaving Angel smirking on the balcony. Back in her room, Nami cried. She cried for her foolish heart, for her impossible situation, for the love she was starting to feel for a man who probably didn't feel the same way, a man who might still belong to someone else. She looked at the journal, at the pressed sampaguita. It was a beautiful gesture, yes. But was it real? Or was it just another part of the act? She decided then and there. She had to protect herself. She had to keep her distance from Leo. She couldn't afford to fall any deeper. She couldn't afford to get hurt again. Pusong niloko pero lumalaban. Yes, her heart was fighting. But maybe, just maybe, it was fighting a losing battle. The celos and lungkot were heavyweight, threatening to drown her. True to her resolve, Nami started putting up walls around Leo again. Higher and thicker this time. She avoided him as much as possible, limiting their interactions to curt nods and necessary, businesslike conversations regarding their public appearances. The journal he gave her, she kept hidden, a painful reminder of a vulnerability she couldn't afford. Leo, confused and a little hurt by Nami's sudden renewed coldness, tried to bridge the distance. Nami, is something wrong? Did it do something? He'd ask, his brow furrowed with concern. Wala, Nami would reply, her voice flat, her eyes avoiding his. Pagod lang siguro. Masyadong maraming events. She couldn't tell him about Angel's words, about the fear gripping her heart. It would make her look weak, pathetic. The carefully constructed charade continued, but the strain was beginning to show. The press, ever watchful, started to pick up on the subtle tensions, the forced smiles, the lack of genuine warmth between the engaged couple. Rumors began to circulate. Is the Monteverde-Sandoval engagement on the rocks? Sources say Liu Monteverde is still pining for ex-flame Angel Locsin. Doña Lucinda was furious. You two need to get your act together, she seethed at them during one tense breakfast. This is not the game. Our family's reputation, the company's stability, it all hinges on this perfect union. So, I suggest you both start acting like you're madly in love, or there will be consequences. The pressure was immense. Nami felt like she was drowning. Then came the accident. It was at another high-profile charity event, this one hosted by a rival business tycoon. The ballroom was packed, the air thick with forced pleasantries and unspoken rivalries. Nami, feeling increasingly isolated and overwhelmed, was trying to navigate her way through the crowd to get some air on the balcony when someone accidentally bumped into her hard. She stumbled, her heel catching on the hem of her long gown, and went sprawling onto the polished marble floor. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Nami felt a searing pain in her ankle, but it was nothing compared to the burning humiliation she felt as she lay there, a spectacle for everyone to see. She could hear Angel Locsin's distinct, mocking titter from somewhere nearby. Before Nami could even process what happened, Liu was there. He pushed through the onlookers, his face a mask of fury, and was that fear. He knelt beside her, his eyes scanning her for injuries. Nami! Are you okay? Anong nangyari? His voice was tight with an emotion Nami couldn't quite decipher. Sorry, ankle. I think he twisted it, Nami winced, tears pricking her eyes, more from embarrassment than pain. Without a word, Liu gently scooped her up into his arms, bridal style, ignoring the shocked murmurs and flashing cameras of the paparazzi who had suddenly materialized. Someone called my driver. And get first aid kit, he barked at the nearby waiter, his usual cool composure completely gone, replaced by raw, protective urgency. He carried her out of the ballroom, his strong arms a surprising comfort. Nami, nestled against his chest, could feel the frantic beating of his heart. For a moment, she forgot the pain, the humiliation, the charade. All she felt was safe. The media had a field day. Photos of Liu carrying damsel in distress Nami were splashed across gossip blogs and tabloids the next day. Liu Monteverde, knight in shining armor or just good acting? Sources say Monteverde's concern for fiance was real. Is their arranged marriage actually a love match? Back at the mansion, after a doctor had confirmed his sprained ankle, and Nami was settled in her room with her foot propped up on pillows, Rolando Monteverde paid her to visit. Hija, kamusta ka na? He asked, his voice surprisingly gentle. Okay lang po, Lolo, Nami replied, still a bit shaken. Salamat po sa pag-aalala. Rolando sat beside her bed. Nami, I need to ask you something. And I want you to be honest with me. He paused. This arrangement with Liu. Is it still just an arrangement? Or has something changed? Nami looked at him, surprised by the question. Lolo, I knew. Because what I saw last night, Nami, Rolando continued, his gaze piercing, Liu's reaction that wasn't acting. That was real. That was a man terrified of seeing the woman he cares about get hurt. Nami's heart skipped a beat. The woman he cares about. Lolo, Rolando said later that evening, cornering Liu in his study. We need to talk. About Nami. Liu, who had been pacing restlessly, stopped. What about her, Lolo? Anak, Rolando said, his voice uncharacteristically soft. Kilala kita. I've seen you with other women. With Angel. Pero yung nakita ko kagabi. Yung takot sa mga mata mo, yung paraan ng pag-aalaga mo kay Nami iba yun, Liu. Iba. He looked straight at his grandson. You're in love with her, aren't you? Liu stared at his Lolo, then looked away, a conflicted expression on his face. He ran a hand through his hair. Lolo, it's complicated. Is it? Rolando pressed. Or are you just too afraid to admit it? Afraid of what your mother will say? Afraid of getting hurt? Leo didn't answer. But the turmoil in his eyes was answer enough for Rolando. For the next few days, Leo was surprisingly attentive to Nami. He'd bring her meals himself, make sure she had everything she needed, even sit with her and read aloud from her favorite books of poetry, habit had picked up after reading her journal. He was still reserved, still guarded, but there was a new softness in his eyes when he looked at her, new gentleness in his touch when he helped her adjust her pillows or handed her a glass of water. Nami found herself slowly, tentatively, letting her guard down again. The kilig was undeniable now. The warmth in her heart whenever he was near, the way her pulse quickened when their eyes met, it was real. But the fear, the doubt, lingered. Akin ka ba talaga, Leo? O panandalian lang to? One afternoon, as Leo was helping Nami with her physiotherapy exercises in the mansion's sprawling garden, he suddenly stopped. He took her hand, his thumb gently caressing her knuckles. Nami, he said, his voice low and earnest. About what my Lolo said about me being in love with you. He paused, his gaze searching hers. He's right. Nami's breath hitched. Her heart soared. He said it, he actually said it. I am in love with you, Nami Sandoval, Leo continued, his voice filled with a sincerity that melted away all her remaining doubts. I think I've been falling for you since that night on the balcony, when you showed me your poems, when you showed me your soul. You're not like anyone I've ever known. You're kind, you're strong, you're real. And you make me want to be better. Tears welled up in Nami's eyes. Tears of joy, of relief. Leo, Before she could reply, new voice, crisp and accented, interrupted them. Well. What have we here? Touching reunion, cousin. They both turned, startled. Standing at the edge of the garden, an expensive designer suitcase at her feet, was a woman Nami had never seen before. She was tall, strikingly beautiful, with an air of sophisticated confidence and a hint of something predatory in her eyes. Leo's face paled. Ashley. In the flesh, cause, the woman said, a smirk playing on her lips. She walked towards them, her gaze sweeping over Nami with a dismissive air. So, she said, her eyes landing kikitisu on Nami, ito pala ang pinalit mo sa akin, Leo. How underwhelming. Ashley. Cousin. Pinalit sa kanya. Nami stared at Leo, her newfound happiness dissolving into a fresh wave of gulat and confusion. Who was this woman? And what did she mean, pinalit sa akin? Leo, looking flustered and cornered, quickly stepped in front of Nami, as if to shield her. He grabbed Nami's hand, his grip surprisingly firm, right there, in front of his newly arrived cousin. Ashley, this is Nami Sandoval, Leo said, his voice tight but determined. En my fiance. He squeezed Nami's hand. And whatever happened between you and me, Ashley, that was a long time ago. It's over. Nami looked at their intertwined hands, then at Leo's resolute face. He was defending her. He was choosing her. The kilig she felt was so intense, it almost made her forget the ominous presence of this Ashley. But Ashley just loved a cold, brittle sound. Over, Leo. Are you sure about that? Because seemed to recall things ending rather abruptly. And I'm not one to leave unfinished business. Her eyes, like chips of ice, settled on Nami. This isn't over. Not Kisai, a long shot. The warmth Nami had felt moments ago turned into chilling premonition. Leo might be in love with her, he might be choosing her now, but it seemed their kunwaring pagmamahalan was about to face its biggest, most dangerous storm yet. And this Ashley, she looked like she was ready to play dirty. Nami, though moved by Leo's declaration and his protective gesture, couldn't fully believe it yet. Akin ka ba talaga, Leo? Or was this just another act, another complication in their already messy lives. The hope was there, yes, but so was the fear. And the fight for their love, it seemed, had only just begun. Ashley Monteverde's arrival was like grenade tossed into Nami and Liu's already fragile world. She was everything Nami wasn't, sophisticated, worldly, and exuding an effortless confidence that came from old money and its privileged upbringing in America. At halatang halata, may malalim na pinagsamahan sila ni Liu noon. Nami tried to be strong, to believe in Liu's declaration of love, but Ashley's constant presence, her subtle digs, and the way she looked at Liu with possessive glint in her eyes, chipped away at Nami's newfound security. Then, the unthinkable happened. One evening, while Nami was having a quiet dinner with Rolando, Liu was supposedly at a late business meeting and Ashley was out with friends, Nami received a frantic call from one of the older children at Bahay Pag-asa. Ate Nami! Ate Nami! Tulong! Nasusunog yung shelter. The child's voice was choked with tears and terror. Nami's blood ran cold. Ano? Anong nangyari? Hindi po namin alam. Bigla na lang pong may umapoy sa may kusina. Ang daming usok, Ate Nami. Natatakot po kami. Sunog. Her home. The children. Sister Agnes, who had just returned from Manila. The fault was unbearable. Hold on, Marco. Tatawag ako ng tulong. Just get everyone out. Please, ilayo mo sila sa apoy. Nami shrieked into the phone, her hands trembling so hard, she could barely hold it. Rolando, seeing Nami's distress, immediately understood. What's wrong, Hija? Lolo, yung Bahay Pag-asa nasusunog po. Nami cried, tears streaming down her face. Without a word, Rolando was on his feet, barking orders into his own phone, mobilizing his resources, fire trucks, ambulances, private security. Nami, meanwhile, could only pray, her heart pounding with a fear so intense it threatened to suffocate her. They rushed to Isla de Clara, the wail of sirens accompanying them. The sight that greeted them was devastating. Flames licked the night sky, engulfing the old wooden structure of Bahay Pag-asa. Mga bombero were battling the blaze, but it was spreading fast. The children, huddled together at a safe distance, were crying, their small faces streaked with soot and terror. Sister Agnes was trying to comfort them, her own face a mask of anguish. Nami ran towards them, her sprained ankle momentarily forgotten. Sister Agnes! Ang mga bata! Okay lang ba sila? Nami, anak! Sister Agnes hugged her tightly. Salamat sa Diyos, na ilabas namin silang lahat. Pero yung bahay, yung mga gamit nila wala na. Nami looked at the burning inferno that was once her home, and a sob escaped her lips. All those memories, all those hopes turning to ash. Sakit. Gulat. Desperation. In the midst of the chaos, as Nami was helping Sister Agnes account for the children, woman stumbled out from the crowd of onlookers, her face smudged with soot, her eyes wide with a mixture of horror and recognition. She was staring straight at Nami. Anak, the woman whispered, her voice raspy, trembling. Nami, ikaw nga ba yan, anak ko? Nami froze. The woman looked vaguely familiar, like a face from a dream, a forgotten memory. But those eyes held pain so deep, so familiar. Sino po kayo? Nami asked, her heart pounding. The woman took a shaky step closer. Hindi mo na ba ako natatandaan, Nami? Ako si Althea. Ako ang nanay mo. Nanay? Her mother. But her mother was dead. That's what Sister Agnes had always told her. Naulila siya sa sunog, years ago, when she was just a baby. Tears streamed down Althea's face. Patawarin mo ako, anak. Patawarin mo ako sa lahat. Hindi kita gustong iwanan noon. Pero pinilit akong magpakasal sa iba para iligtas ang pamilya ko. Iniwan kita kay Sister Agnes para sa kaligtasan mo. Akala ko iyon ang tama. The revelation hit Nami like a physical blow. Her mother was alive. All these years. She had a mother. The shock was so profound, Nami felt her knees buckle. Just then, Liu arrived, his face grim as he took in the scene. He had heard about the fire and had rushed over. He saw Nami, pale and swaying, and immediately went to her side, supporting her. Nami! Are you okay? But Nami barely registered his presence. Her world had just been turned upside down. Her mother. Alvea, seeing Liu, looked even more distressed. Sino siya, anak? Before Nami could answer, Ashley Monteverde appeared, seemingly out of nowhere, a small, satisfied smirk on her face. She had her phone in her hand. Well, what touching family reunion, Ashley drawled, her voice dripping with sarcasm. And speaking of reunions, Liu, darling, I think Nami here would be very interested to see this. She played the video on her phone. It was a short clip, obviously taken secretly. It showed Liu and Angel Locsin in what looked like a hotel room. They were arguing, their voices low but intense. Then, Angel leaned in and kissed Liu. And Liu didn't push her away immediately. He seemed hesitant. Conflicted. The video ended abruptly. Nami stared at the screen, her heart shattering into a million more pieces. Liu and Angel. The video looked recent. Was this what he was doing during those late business meetings? Was this why he seemed so guilty when Clarissa, who was actually Angel, Nami realized with a jolt, Clarissa de Villa was Angel Locsin's screen name, confronted him at the party. That video Liu began, his face pale. Nami, it's not what it looks like. It was taken out of context. Angel ambushed me. I pushed her away right after that. But Nami wasn't listening. The fire, her long-lost mother suddenly appearing, and now this betrayal. It was too much. All the trust she had slowly, painfully started to build in Liu, it crumbled. With a cry of anguish, Nami did something she never thought she'd do. She slapped Liu hard across the face. Manloloko, she shrieked, tears of anger and pain streaming down her face. Lear, how could you? I trusted you. Akala ko iba ka. Liu stared at her, his cheek red from her slap, his eyes filled with hurt so profound it mirrored her own. Nami, please let me explain me. Explain what, Liu? Ashley interjected, her voice triumphant. That you're still stringing Angel along. That this whole engagement with Nami is just a sham to please your lolo. Face it, Nami. You were never anything more than a means to an end. Nami couldn't breathe. The pain was suffocating. She looked at Liu, searching for any sign of denial, any flicker of the love she thought she had seen in his eyes. But all she saw was the pained, conflicted man. Tapos na tayo, Liu Monteverde, Nami said, her voice cold, dead. The deal is off. I don't want your money. I don't want your name. I don't want you. She turned to her mother, Alvea, who was watching the scene with wide, horrified eyes. Ikaw, Nami said, her voice trembling, kung totoong ang ikaw ang nanay ko, kailangan nating mag-usap. Pero hindi ngayon. Hindi dito. Ignoring Liu's desperate pleas, ignoring Ashley's smug smile, ignoring Rolando's worried frown, Nami walked away. She went to Sister Agnes and the children, who were being temporarily housed in the nearby barangay hall. This was where she belonged. With her real family. That night, as a cold rain started to fall, mirroring the tears Nami couldn't stop, Liu Monteverde stood outside the barangay hall, drenched to the bone. He didn't tear aside to go in. He didn't call out her name. He just stood there, under the pouring rain, a solitary, heartbroken figure, watching the dim light from the window where he knew Nami was. The fire had destroyed Bahay Pag-asa. But it had also unearthed the past Nami never knew, and it had burnt to ashes the fragile hope she had started to build with Liu. Sunog sa nakaraan, sunog sa kasalukuyan. All that was left was sakit, gulat, and a future that looked bleaker than ever. The temporary shelter at the barangay hall was cramped and noisy, but it was filled with a sense of community and resilience that the opulent Monteverde mansion sorely lacked. Nami, along with Sister Agnes and her newly found mother, Alvea, threw themselves into caring for the children and coordinating relief efforts. Donations poured in from the kind-hearted people of Isla de Clara, and even from some anonymous benefactors in Manila. Nami had a strong suspicion Rolando Monteverde was behind some of them, though she didn't dare confirm. Her conversations with Alvea were difficult, filled with years of unspoken pain, regret, and tentative questions. Alvea recounted her story, young woman forced into an arranged marriage, her impoverished family, desperate escape, the heartbreaking decision to leave Nami in the care of Sister Agnes to protect her from the controlling and abusive husband. Nami listened, her heart aching for the mother she never knew and for the lost years between them. Forgiveness didn't come easy, but understanding began to bloom. One afternoon, while Nami was sorting through donated clothes, Rolando Monteverde approached her. He looked older, more tired than she had ever seen him. "Nami, iha," he said, his voice gentle. "Pwede ba tayong mag-usap? Kahit saglit lang." Nami hesitated. She still felt a deep sense of betrayal towards the Monteverde family, especially Liu. Pero may kung anong awa siyang naramdaman para sa matanda. She nodded and they found a quiet corner in a nearby local kapihan, the aroma of Barako coffee filling the air. "Alam kong galit ka pa rin sa amin, lalo na kay Leo," Rolando began, stirring his coffee. "At naiintindihan ko. Pero may mga bagay na kailangan mong malaman, Nami. Mga bagay na hindi sinabi sa'yo ni Ashley o ni Angel." Nami listened, her guard still up. Si Angel Locsin, o Clarissa de Villa, kung ano man ang gusto niyang itawag sa sarili niya, Rolando said, his voice laced with a rare bitterness, she was never good for Leo. She was manipulative, ambitious, and she nearly destroyed our company a few years ago with her schemes. She used Leo, played with his affections. Yung video na pinakita ni Ashley totoo, nagkita sila. Pero si Angel ang nagpumilit. She threatened to create a scandal if Leo didn't meet her. Leo went there to end things with her, once and for all. Para protektahan ka, Nami. At para protektahan ang pamilya namin mula sa isa na namang gulo na kagagawan niya. Nami stared at Rolando, stunned. So, Leo wasn't lying. Angel was the villain in this story. As for Ashley, Rolando continued, a sad smile on his lips, she has always been jealous of Leo. Jealous of his closeness to me, jealous of his inheritance. She saw you as a threat, Nami. A threat to her own ambitions. Kaya siya gumawa ng paraan para sirain kayo ni Leo. The pieces of the puzzle started to fall into place. The inconsistencies, the manipulations, it all made a sick kind of sense. Nami felt a wave of guilt wash over her. She had misjudged Leo. She had slapped him, accused him, pushed him away based on lies and half-truths. Si Leo, Nami, Rolando said, his eyes pleading, he's not perfect. He's made mistakes. Marami. He can be cold, distant, arrogant minsan. Pero may mabuting puso yan, iha. At yung puso na iyon matagal nang tumitibok para sa'yo. Kahit noong hindi pa niya inaamin sa sarili niya. He pulled out a worn, leather-bound journal from his briefcase, Leo's journal. He asked me to give this to you. Kung sakaling handa ka nang makinig sa panig niya. Nami took the journal with trembling hands. Later that night, back in the noisy but comforting chaos of the barangay hall, she read it. Page after page was filled with Leo's anguish, his confusion, his growing feelings for her. His frustration with his mother, his disdain for their arranged marriage, but also, his reluctant admiration for Nami's strength, her kindness, her quiet resilience. She's like Isampagita, one entry read. Simple, unassuming, but with a strength and fragrance that can fill a room. And I am a fool for almost crushing her. Another entry, written after their first real conversation on the balcony, her poems they speak to part of me thought was long dead. Is it possible to find connection in this farce? And the last entry, written the night of the fire, before he knew about her mother, saw her tonight, surrounded by flames, yet she was the one giving comfort, giving strength. And I knew, with a certainty that terrified and exhilarated me. I love her. God help me, I love Nami Sandoval. And I will do anything to protect her, even if it means walking away. Tears streamed down Nami's face as she read his words. Patawad, Leo. Patawad sa hindi ko pakikinig. Patawad sa pagusga ko. The guilt was immense, but underneath it, she knew, stronger feeling was blooming, pag-asa. And a love that refused to be extinguished. She knew what she had to do. The next few weeks were a flurry of activity. With the initial shock of the fire and all this reappearance subsiding, Nami focused on rebuilding. She worked with Sister Agnes and Olvia to plan the new Bahay Pag-asa. Using some of the initial funds Rolando had released, he had insisted, despite Nami's initial refusal, saying it was an investment in Isla de Clara's future. Olvia, it turned out, had some experience in construction management from her previous life, and her practical skills were invaluable. Slowly, tentatively, Nami and Olvia started to forge new relationship, mother and daughter, healing old wounds, building new memories. One afternoon, Nami took Olvia to the Paling for the first time. It was a simple, everyday activity, but for them, it was monumental. They haggled over the price of galunggong, laughed at tea vendors' corny jokes, and shared cheap but delicious halo-halo under the shade of a market stall. It felt normal. It felt like family. Isla de Clara was celebrating its annual town fiesta. The streets were alive with colorful banderitas, the air filled with the smell of lechon and grilled seafood, and the sound of lively music from Tperia. Nami, feeling lightness she hadn't felt in a long time, decided to take some of the Bahay Pag-asa children to enjoy the festivities. And there, amidst the joyful chows of the fiesta, she saw him. Leo. He was standing near the cotton candy stall, looking a bit lost, a bit out of place in his simple polo shirt and jeans. He wasn't with Ashley. He wasn't with Angel. He was alone. Their eyes met across the crowded plaza. Time seemed to stop. The noise of the fiesta faded away. All Nami could see was Leo. All Leo could see was Nami. Pag-asa. Ginhawa. And a silent question that hung in the air between them, tayo na nga ba talaga? Nami's heart pounded in her chest. She remembered Leo's words from his journal. We'll do anything to protect her, even if it means walking away. He had walked away, thinking it was for her own good. But now she knew the truth. She took a deep breath. It was time to stop running. It was time to fight for the love she deserved. With a new resolve in her eyes, Nami started walking towards him, a tentative smile on her lips. The children from Bahay Pag-asa, sensing kilig moment, started to giggle and follow her. Patawad, Leo, she thought. Pero may halaga ka sa akin. Sobrang halaga. And this time, I won't let you walk away. 1 year later. The new Bahay Pag-asa stood proudly in Isla de Clara, a vibrant splash of color against the lush green landscape. Hindi na siya sira-sira at luma. It was a beautiful, two-story structure, designed with love and practicality, with airy dormitories, a spacious playroom, a well-stocked library, and a sprawling organic garden that supplied fresh vegetables for the children's meals. Pinangalanan itong Bahaghari Home, a symbol of hope after the storm, the name chosen by the children themselves. And today, Bahaghari Home was even more festive than usual. Banderitas fluttered in the gentle sea breeze, the scent of adobo and pancit wafted from the outdoor kitchen, and the sound of children's laughter mingled with soft, romantic music. It was Nami and Leo's wedding day. Their wedding was nothing like the grand, ostentatious affairs the Monteverdes were known for. This was simple, heartfelt, and deeply personal, held right there in the garden of Bahaghari Home, surrounded beside the children they both adored, their families, and their closest friends. Wala nang kontrata. Wala nang pilitan. This was real. This was for love. Nami looked radiant in a simple, elegant piña silk gown, her hair adorned with fresh sampaguita flowers, just like the one Liu had given her in the gulayan. Her mother, Althea, stood beside her, her eyes shining with tears of joy and pride. Sister Agnes, her face beaming, officiated the ceremony. Rolando Monteverde, looking happier and more relaxed than Nami had ever seen him, sat in the front row, occasionally dabbing his eyes with a handkerchief. Even Doña Lucinda was there, the quiet, almost subdued presence, her usual stern facade softened to a hint of something Nami couldn't quite decipher. Acceptance, perhaps. Leo, handsome and a little bit nervous in his barong Tagalog, couldn't take his eyes off Nami as she walked down the makeshift easel, escorted by two of the oldest Bahay Pag-asa boys. When she reached him, he took her hands, his own trembling slightly. "You look beautiful, Nami," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "Worth waiting for." Nami squeezed his hands. "Ikaw din worth fighting for." Their vows were simple, heartfelt, and written either themselves. They spoke of second chances, of healing, of finding love in the most unexpected places, of building a future together, not based on contracts or obligations, but on mutual respect, trust, and a love that had weathered storms and emerged stronger. One particularly touching moment was when Liu turned to Althea, Nami's mother. He took her hand, bowed his head respectfully, and said, "Nay Althea, pangako po, aalagaan ko po si Nami. Mamahalin ko po siya ng buong puso ko. At kayo rin po, itinuturing ko na ring pamilya." Althea, overcome with emotion, could only nod, tears streaming down her face as she hugged her future son-in-law. Ginhawa. Pagmamahalan. Yun ang nanaig sa puso ng lahat. The reception was a joyful, noisy affair. The children of Bahaghari home performed a special song and dance number for Nami and Kuya Liu. There was a lot of food, a lot of laughter, and a lot of love. Even Doña Lucinda was seen tapping her foot to the music, a small, almost imperceptible smile on her lips. Later, as the sun began to set, casting a warm, golden glow over Bahaghari home, Nami found herself sitting alone on a quiet bench, overlooking the sea. She pulled out a familiar, leather-bound journal, the one Liu had given her on her birthday, and a pen. She began to write. "Dear Jules," her voice-over began, as the scene transitioned to show snippets of their new life. Liu patiently teaching the Bahaghari kids how to paint, Nami and Althea laughing together as they tended the organic garden. Rolando Monteverde reading stories to a group of enraptured children, even Doña Lucinda awkwardly but gently helping a little girl tie her shoelaces. "Naalala mo pa ba yung sinabi mo sa akin noon, nung minsang sumulat ako sa'yo sa advice column mo sa dyaryo? Bata pa ako noon, litong-lito sa buhay, nagtatanong kung may pag-asa pa ba para sa isang ampon na tulad ko. Sabi mo, Nami, minsan, ang mga kwentong hindi mo pinlano, yun ang tunay mong tadhana. Huwag kang matakot sumugal sa pag-ibig, kahit pa maraming pagsubok. Dahil ang pusong marunong magmahal, yun ang pinakamatapang sa lahat." The voice-over continued, showing Nami and Liu working side by side in Bahaghari home, their hands often brushing, their smiles easy and affectionate. It showed them tucking the children into bed, their faces soft with love. "Ang tagal kong hindi naniwala sa'yo, Ate Jules. Ang tagal kong tinakbuhan yung sinasabi mong tadhana. Ang dami kong takot, ang dami kong duda. Pero dumating si Leo. Dumating siya sa buhay ko sa paraang hindi ko inaasahan, sa panahong akala ko, wala ng pag-asa." The scene shifted to Nami and Leo, standing hand in hand, watching the sunset, their silhouettes framed against the vibrant hill. Hindi naging madali, Ate Jules. Maraming sakit, maraming luha, maraming pagkakamali. Pero sa gitna ng lahat ng iyon, natutunan kong magpatawad sa iba at higit sa lahat, sa sarili ko. Natutunan kong ang tunay na pag-ibig, hindi perpekto pero laging lumalaban. Laging umaasa. Nami closed her journal, a serene smile on her face. Liu walked over and sat beside her, slipping an arm around her shoulders. He kissed her temple. "Ngayon, Ate Jules, masasabi kong nahanap ko na yung tadhana ko. Hindi man sa paraang pinlano ko, pero masigit pa sa pinangarap ko. The final scene showed a framed photograph hanging on the wall inside the newly inaugurated Bahaghari home. It wasn't just Leo and Nami's wedding photo. Beside it, equally prominent, were candid shots of all the children of Bahay Pag-asa, their faces bright with laughter and hope. And in the center, a slightly faded but treasured photo of a younger sister Agnes, her arms around a very young Nami. Salamat, at Jules, Nami's voice-over concluded, filled with profound sense of peace and gratitude. Salamat sa pagtuturo sa aking maniwala ulit. At salamat, Leo, mahal kita. Baka nga, ang mga kwentong hindi mo pinlano, yun ang tunay mong tadhana. Leo smiled, pulling Nami closer. They watched the last rays of the sun dip below the horizon, painting the air in breathtaking hues of orange and gold. Their hearts were full. Their family was complete. And their love story, once iisa 0 million peso contract, had become priceless. Mga minamahal kong mambabasa. Una sa lahat, mula sa kaibuturan ng aking puso, maraming salamat sa inyong pagsubaybay at pagtangkilik sa ating mga kwento, mula sa nakakakilig na adobo ni Jessa at Lino, sa makulay na pag-iibigan ni na Amber at Caleb sa gitna ng unos, sa mapaghamong tadhana ni na Ara at Kian, hanggang sa nakakaantig na kontrata ng pag-ibig ni na Nami at Leo. Habang isinusulat ko ang bawat kabanata, para na rin akong kasamang naglakbay ng ating mga bida. Naramdaman ko ang kanilang mga kilig moments, yung mga tampuhan na nauwi sa mas malalim na pag-intindi, yung selos na sumusubok sa kanilang tiwala, at higit sa lahat, yung pag-asa na kahit gaano kahirap ang sitwasyon, mailiwanag pa ring naghihintay. Aminado ako, may mga pagkakataon na pati ako, nadadala sa emosyon, napapangiti, naiinis, minsan ay palihim na napapaluha kasabay ng ating mga karakter. Ang bawat isa sa kanila ay may espesyal na lugar dito sa puso ko. Sa likod ng mga romansa at drama, ang nais ko talagang iparating ay ilang mahahalagang aral sa buhay. Tulad ng ating mga bida, lahat tayo ay dumadaan sa mga pagsubok. Lahat tayo, minsan, nagkakamali, natatakot, at nangangailangan ng pangalawang pagkakataon. Pero sana, sa pamamagitan ng kanilang mga kwento, maalala natin na ang tunay na pag-ibig ay hindi perpekto pero laging lumalaban. Hindi ito tungkol sa fairytale endings lang, kundi sa pagtanggap sa mga kapintasan ng isa't isa, at sa patuloy na pagpili na mahalin sila araw-araw. Mahalaga ang pagpapatawad sa iba at lalo na sa ating sarili. Lahat tayo ay may dalang sugat mula sa nakaraan, pero ang pagpapatawad ang unang hakbang tungo sa paghilom. Huwag matakot sumugal para sa sariling kaligayahan. Minsan, kailangan nating talikuran ang takot at yakapin ang mga pagkakataon, kahit pa hindi ito ayon sa plano. Dahil baka nga, ang mga kwentong hindi mo pinlano, yun ang tunay mong tadhana. May halaga ang bawat isa sa atin, anuman ang ating pinagmulan. Huwag nating hayaang diktahan ang lipunan o ng nakaraan kung sino tayo at kung ano ang kaya nating marating. Sana po ay nag-enjoy kayo sa pagbabasa gaya ng pag-enjoy ko sa pagsusulat. Kung may mga aral o emosyon kayong napulot mula sa ating mga kwento, huwag po kayong mahiyang i-share ito sa inyong mga kaibigan at mahal sa buhay. At syempre, love na love ko pong mabasa ang inyong mga comments at insights. Ano ng paborito niyong eksena? Sinong karakter ang pinakatumagos sa puso niyo? Anong hugot lines ang nagpa-aray ki o nagpa-sana all sa inyo? Your feedback means the world to me. Hanggang sa muli nating pagkikita sa mga susunod pang kwento. Patuloy tayong maniwala sa kapangyarihan ng pag-ibig, pag-asa, at pangalawang pagkakataon. Nagmamahal. Ang inyong manunulat.